Hello, everyone. I'm JJ Dixon with the Jacksonville Brotherhood of Police Officers, and we are back again for another round of conversations with some of our retired officers from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. And today we are very fortunate to have with us a young man who spent more than 25 years. 33 years. Wow. With the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. So with that, I'm going to be quiet, and I'm going to let Tony Davis, retired, I'll just say officer, and you can go into your accolades, who you are.
All right. Well, JJ, first of all, thank you for having me.
Of course.
I appreciate the invitation, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. So as you said, hey, I'm Tony Davis, retired from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office after 33 years and 9 months, as my younger brother would remind me of.
Yep.
And I retired as the Director of Police Services, serving on Sheriff Mike Williams' executive staff. So I was pretty fortunate to ascend through the ranks. And I will say this, when I began my career back in 1986, wow, I did not envision a position where I was on staff, especially, as a director. But I often tell people, God has had his hands on me my entire life, my career. And it's not doors that I open, but doors that God opened for me. And I ascended through the ranks because of those that came before me.
Correct.
Like my father, Tommy Mays,
wow,
like Wilbur Wiggins,
all right,
like Chief Scrivens, people like that.
Yeah.
They endured some things that you could never imagine.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they weren't able to enjoy, some of the successes that we have.
So true.
So I always keep that in mind, and I always remember that I stand on the shoulder of giants,
all right,
men and women. We often talk about the men, but we had some women.
Forget about the women.
And in particular, Aretha Smith.
Yeah, Aretha Smith.
Phyllis Williams. We had women that also blazed that trail for us too. So we cannot forget about the contributions that all of our African-American officers made.
Right. Let me ask you a question. So you came on in 1986.
86.
I started in 88.
Okay.
1986, was that the class when they did the recruitment for African Americans, or was that before then?
No, that was after that.
That was right after that.
Was after that.
Okay. Okay. I asked that question because when you mentioned your father coming on in the 50s, I guess.
Yes.
In the 50s, and we know that they were just starting to hire African American officers in Jacksonville in the 50s, and then thinking about you later coming on in the 80s when there was a similar situation going on.
Yes.
Where they actually put out, and I have to see if I can find the clip, but they actually put an advertisement in the newspaper.
I remember that
they were looking for African American officers. So you said right before that?
I was right before that.
So chances are when you came on, that was still an issue.
It was. So when I came on, it's ironic. There were no black sergeants.
Wow.
We had one black lieutenant at the time, and that was Joe Henry.
Wow.
We had one chief, and that was Chief Jerome Spates, who I thank the world of.
Oh, yeah, we all do. Love him.
Terrific man. And then we had a director, and that was Nathaniel Glover. But we had no black sergeants. We had the one black lieutenant. So we didn't have the representation across the ranks that you see now.
Yeah, right.
And it was so ironic. I would think to myself, in this day and age, we have some African Americans
that are qualified.
And about, I think, 4 years later, that's when we begin to see the change in African Americans, being promoted to the rank of sergeant, and then it's so progressing.
Funny hearing you say that because I got a chance to speak to Mr. Fluker, Adam Fluker, just retired after 61 years, and he started way back in the I believe in the late 50s or early 60s. Another giant. But he literally said some of the same things that you just said when he started. He said we had no representation.
No.
Those were his words. We had no black sergeants, no black. He said those things. And it's just weird to me hearing that from the 50s to the late 80s, none of that had changed over a 30-year period. So I'm grateful for what we have now. I'm happy to see,
yes.
you know, that so many are having an opportunity to advance and to be promoted. And I do understand that the numbers matter too, because there are more African American officers now on the police force than there were then.
Yes, absolutely.
But let's talk about you and your time. So you started in '86. Did you know that you wanted to be a policeman growing up?
No, actually I didn't. So that was never my thought.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I thought I wanted to do something in music and business.
Okay.
But coming up, you know, I enjoyed a lot of the police shows.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I knew my father was a police officer.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't grow up with my father, but, you know, we had a great relationship.
Okay. Oh, that's awesome.
Terrific relationship. And
Mr. PL, but we'll talk about that later.
But no, I didn't know I would be a police officer. And so after the military, I'm in the Air Force in 1980 after I graduated from high school. And so after leaving the military, I knew I wanted to do, you know, some things. And I worked at a couple of companies, but I knew those weren't the places that I was going to end up.
Right.
And I was talking to my father one day, and I was contemplating joining the highway patrol. And so we talked about it, and he was giving me the ins and outs of the academy and what that would look like. I said, okay. And so I started looking at highway patrol. I started looking at the salary range. And I'm thinking, man,
they don't make no money.
Pretty bad.
Put your life on the line.
Yeah. So one day I was talking to my dad, and he said, well, son, have you thought about corrections? I said, well, no, I actually haven't, Dad. So we talked, and he said, you need to apply to be a corrections officer. He said, I think you'll work out fine. And so I did. And as you know, fate would have it, in March of '86, I entered the Corrections Academy.
I did not know you were in corrections.
No, and so I started in March of '86 in the corrections. During that time, it was a few months later, they decided, I think for the first time in about 2 or 3 years, they were going to have another full-time police academy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was going back and forth on whether I should, you know, apply. And I talked to my dad about it, and he said, well, why not? You know, what's to stop you?
Why not?
But I was so close to graduating from corrections. And I remember talking to George Marshall, another one of my heroes, for many reasons. And we had this conversation because he was one of my instructors at the academy.
Yep.
And I went to him and I said, Officer Marshall, I said, I have a chance to go, but I'm so close to graduating. And he pulled me to the side and he shared some words that I won't share on camera, but they were very enlightening. And in short, you better go to the police academy. And so I did. So I never finished. I was 2 weeks away from graduating corrections when I started the police academy.
Okay.
And then fast forward, I was fortunate.
Wait a minute. So, and this might be a first. This might be a historical fact. You started the Corrections Academy, never finished, and transitioned into the Police Academy. I don't know of anyone else that's ever done that.
I was in the academy for a long time. A long, long time.
You were in great shape, though, weren't you?
Yeah. Every time I passed by Huffman Boulevard, I was running up and down Huffman Boulevard.
Right.
But, yeah, I was so close. I thought, wow, do I want to start this over again?
Yeah.
And I'm glad I listened to my dad. I'm glad I listened to Officer Marshall. So they really helped me make up my mind. They pretty much made it up for me and stuff. But I'm so grateful for that.
And I bet they were so proud when you started to move on up. So you got in, you became a police officer. What area did you ride?
So, you know, after training, I rode, it was Zone 1 at the time, which is now Zone 5.
North side. North side.
And I grew up in this area, in that area as well, too. Grand Park, actually, in this area here, Durkeeville, too.
Wow.
I used to live 2 doors down from this church.
Wow.
Yes, literally 2 doors down.
Wow.
So this is my
Talk about a full circle moment.
Very much full circle.
Wow.
But, you know, when I came back to work in this area, I had a vested interest because I had family, friends, and neighbors, people that watched me grow up.
Yeah, right.
People that had moved into the neighborhood after I moved, but this was my community and my neighborhood. And I was happy to be working in this area.
Yeah.
And I worked this area for a number of years, so I was happy.
Wow. I can attest. It always makes you feel good when you can go back into your neighborhood and give back in that way. And it makes you proud too, because the people that are there, that were there when you were growing up, were like, you made it. You are somebody.
And I heard that. I heard that a lot. Because, some of the guys that I went to school with, unfortunately, they took a different path.
Yeah, right.
And the end result wasn't as positive.
Yeah, right. Right. So then once you got good in the sheriff's office, I understand that you became what they call a SWAT man. Speaking of being in the academy forever.
Yes.
Paid off, didn't it?
So somewhere along the way, I had this wild idea that I wanted to join the SWAT team. And I knew a couple of guys that were on the team. I was on the patrol task force, and some of the guys were on the team. And I would watch how they would train and just some of the things that they were able to do. I thought, man, that would be pretty interesting. So I decided, well, you know what? I'll give it a try. So I did. The very first time I tried, I failed the test.
I was going to ask you how many times did you
So I ended up trying 3 times.
When you say you failed the test, we're not talking about a written test, are we?
No, I failed the PT test.
The physical part.
I never thought
it's really, because I know I might sound like I'm crazy asking these questions, but I think some people don't know that when you go out to be a member of the SWAT team, it's you have to be in tip-top shape of your life.
It is. It is all. You're all in, or you're all out, and so you're constantly training together as a team and individually. And so I knew what the physical requirements were. I thought, okay, pull-ups. I never thought pull-ups would be so difficult when that was the very first, test in the exam. Well, if you fail one component, then you fail the test.
Wow.
So I failed the exam right out of the gate.
Oh, boy.
But I decided I'm here. I'm going to go through and finish up everything. So I went through everything else. I passed everything else except for this rope climb. And I thought, oh, my God.
That's the one we all heard about. I didn't even know about all the other stuff. When I heard about climbing that rope, I was like, I never even think about doing that.
It was interesting. And I watched guys go up that rope like it was nothing. I'm thinking,
I can do that.
Okay. And, well, it was different. So it failed, but I did get some encouraging words from, some of the veterans on the team. They said, the fact that I didn't quit after the first one, demonstrated.
Most people would have.
And so, hey, fast forward, I trained harder. I mastered the pull-ups and I mastered that rope. I mean, I worked on that rope like you wouldn't believe. And I passed the PT test, but 2 other guys and well-deserving guys were selected before me.
So wait a minute. So after you go through all of that, if all that physical stuff, if you did well, you still had to be selected.
Right. You go through an interview panel with the entire team. And so it's the entire team you're sitting in front of, and they want to see, hey, can you mesh, with this team? So we went through that process and did well, but there were 2 other guys that, they did better, and they deserved to be there.
Right.
So we fast forward probably about 3 more months down the road, and there's another test, and I don't stop training, and I get selected at that time.
Wow,
and so
good for you.
So I spent about 5 years on the SWAT team.
Wow.
And it was interesting. You're always on call. You're walking around with this pager, and it's like an appendage. It's like your hand. You don't move without this pager, and regardless of where you're at, when that pager goes off, you got to move. You got to drop what you're doing and go. And unfortunately, I had to do that a couple of times. Out with my son and family, and then some of the alerts and the calls we got, were pretty interesting. Pretty sad, but so I was fortunate. I got promoted. In 96, and I was invited to stay on the team as a team lead, team leader. But the commitment that was needed, my kids were younger and they were involved in activities, and I spent 5 years away. I didn't want to lose any more time. I'd already, devoted enough time in which, I don't regret. But I decided it was time for me to move on to another phase, and I did, and I'm glad I did.
And do most guys do that are on the SWAT team? Do they stay indefinitely, or do they kind of stay for 5 or 6 years and then they kind of go on? Because I know it's a big commitment.
It is. Well, you have a lot of guys that stay 15 years, some 20 years.
Wow.
You got some guys, they'll do like 5, 6 years and move on to some other things. Some guys, during that time, if you got promoted to sergeant, well, the only team leads were sergeants, so you got promoted off the team.
Yeah.
They've changed some things since then. But yeah, there were guys that have been on the team like 20 years, plus. And that is a tremendous amount of time devoted to that team, because at any given time when that pager goes off, whether it's 2 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon, rain, snow, sleet, whatever the case may be, you've got to answer that pager and you got to move.
Wow. Before we move on to the next subject, I just want to note that recently I was at a funeral for a retired officer who was once on the SWAT team. I won't say his name because I don't have permission from the family, but if it's okay, I'll probably post his name later. But at his funeral, you saw all these SWAT members. A lot of them were retired, but even the younger ones, they came in and they did sort of a tribute to him. And I had never seen that done before for anyone. And I thought it was just absolutely, it blew me away. And at the time, it made sense that they were doing a tribute, but it didn't make sense. Now I can put it in perspective because I understand the commitment and the level of camaraderie and brotherhood, I guess now, that those people on the SWAT team has, and it makes sense now. But it was one of the most touching things that I've ever seen done at a policeman's funeral. So yeah,
that was that was very moving.
Yeah, it was.
And to be able to pay honor and tribute, to a former member. That did quite well on the team.
Oh yeah, I heard all about him.
Some funny stories. I won't go into those, but he did quite well. We had an opportunity to work side by side on the team for a few years together before I left the team, and really proud to work with him.
He was a good guy, really good guy. All right, well, moving on to the next thing. So you get promoted to sergeant, and you go through your sergeant years, and I'm sure everybody probably thought he's a smart guy. He'll do well. He'll make lieutenant. So you made lieutenant.
After about I spent 12 years as a sergeant.
Wow.
And I went through the process of studying and prepping for the lieutenant's test. But those first few times that I went after the position of lieutenant, I underestimated what it would take. And so I had to really examine myself and say, okay, what am I missing? What do I need to do? I'm missing something. Didn't make any excuses. And I figured out what I was doing wrong. And I got some help, and I was able to eventually, get there. And when I did get promoted, I got a call from another guy that was on the list. I won't call his name, but he said, hey, have you seen the list? I said, no. He said, you're going to make lieutenant? I said, no. I said, well, I'm headed back to the station now. No, I hadn't. I said, I'm headed back to the station. He said, you're going to make lieutenant? And so when I got back and I saw the list, it's like, wow, this is for real. So I called my mom, let her know.
Call your mom.
Yeah, I got to call mom, call my mom, and I called my dad, and I told him. And, of course, I called my wife and my kids. But what I told my dad as he came to the promotional ceremony, I said, Dad, you didn't have the opportunity to make rank. You were on the list, and we talked about that. He was not. And so when I first made sergeant, I told him, I said, Dad, one chevron is for me and one is for you. I said, because it's not that you weren't smart enough or you couldn't. It was just a different time. You had a lot of challenges and obstacles put in your way. I said, so one is for me and one is for you. And I said, and if I'm fortunate to make rank, in the future, one side will be for me and one side will be for you.
Oh, that's nice.
So when I made lieutenant, told him, hey, 1 bar is for you and, 1 bar is for me. And then,
I'm about to need to get these Kleenex. That's special.
But that was important to me. And it was important that he knew, that he didn't get
so many of those guys from back in that time never received that type of validation.
No.
They were just always told you're there because they had to have you.
Yes.
Basically, they never received the validation that you could have done more.
Yes.
You should have been allowed to do more.
Yes.
So I think that's really special that you would give him that opportunity to do that vicariously through you.
Yeah, there was so much of him in me, and not to be undeniable. And just listening to some of the things that he went through. And we didn't talk about some things he went through, but some of the things that we did talk about that he went through, I always held that close. I thought, wow, you were denied. College educated man, very intelligent, very hardworking, as were so many others and stuff. Just during that time,
it was different.
They had many obstacles, many more obstacles than we, had to overcome.
It was different.
Yeah.
It was different. I guess this might be a good opportunity for me to point out that we keep talking about your dad, but I'm looking over your shoulder. You probably didn't even notice that picture. Did you see that picture?
Yeah.
And I'm looking at that picture of him. Man, he was so young and spry, and he just, the picture though that I always see of him, it's everywhere, is that one PAL picture, the first aid picture. Have you seen that?
I think so. I think there was one for the baseball team.
Yeah. No, this one he's actually doing first aid on a kid.
No, I haven't seen that one.
I want to say that's the one that the sheriff's office has out there as well. But I've seen it over the years a lot. But that's why I call him Mr. Pal, because that picture seems to be everywhere of him administering first aid to that little boy, and that was a long time ago.
One thing about him, and we talked, youth were very important to him. And, giving them a pathway, giving them, something constructive to do. That's why he and some of the other, African-American officers back then, they started the youth baseball league, and that's what PAL.
Saw that picture. I did see that picture.
That's what PAL, PAL came out of that, the youth baseball league.
Oh, okay. So it was the youth baseball league just to give the kids something to do. And then the police athletic league kind of blossomed from that. And now it's grown into what we know it to be now. That's a fully funded operational arm of the sheriff's office.
Right, and then I was looking for the article, and I know I have it. I moved some boxes around, but I have the picture of him and some of the other officers and this group of, young black youth with the youth baseball.
I have that picture.
Okay.
I have that picture.
Yeah.
I'll share that picture on here.
And, I was looking at that. This is something that they devoted their time to.
Yes. And it's been pointed out before that many of them were not being paid to do that stuff. They were just doing it because it was the right thing to do, and they wanted to help the kids.
Yes.
Yeah. I have that picture. Anthony Rogers, he's also deceased, but he was our black historian. He had everything. And so I was privileged before he passed away. That was one of the pictures and all these pictures that you see, he passed all these pictures along to me.
He was a historian. So, we talked about that a lot. Another giant. And Anthony, he was that voice for everybody.
Yes, he was. Whether you wanted him to be or not.
There you go. But, the pictures, the stories, the information that he was, compiling, it was,
amazing.
It was amazing.
It really was. I'm honored to just have gotten my hands on the little bit that I have gotten my hands on, but there is so much more information out there that he has from back in the 50s and the 60s that really I wish could be shared.
So do I. I'm hoping and praying one day that it will, because that information needs to be shared.
Yeah, it does. Because we don't want our history to die, which is one of the reasons why we're doing this, because we don't want our history to die. So let's get back to you. You did make lieutenant. And so we, well, at the time that you made lieutenant, was that the last stop, or were they still testing for captains?
No, so there were no captains at the time.
Okay, so that was the last stop.
That was the last stop.
So that should have been your last stop.
That should have been,
But God had plans.
He did. He did.
Had other plans.
He most certainly did.
That you never saw coming.
No, I didn't. I did. And, I tell people, and I don't share this story often, but I tell people, we all get frustrated, about things along the way. Don't make decisions in the midst of your frustration, because you can make a decision that might preempt a blessing.
Ooh, that was good.
And, at one point I was at the point I said, it's about 26, 27 years. I said, it's time for me to go. I'm ready to leave. And I was getting frustrated. I was like, it's just time to go. And the voice of reason, I said, no, it's not your time. And thank God I didn't, give into that, because just a few years later, I got appointed to assistant chief.
Wow.
And I thought, on that moment, as I was going back over that whole process, had I given into that frustration, out of preemptive blessing that God had for me. But what I did know, there was even a bigger blessing that he had in store for me beyond that and stuff. And so I tell people oftentimes, I say, you know, they would look at the gold, they would look at the stars, and I would tell them point blank, this is all God. This is all God.
You know, they say stay humble. That is the epitome of I'm humble.
I believe, and I've shared this with a lot of people, I believe that the higher you ascend, the more humble you should be and become.
Correct. That's right.
Because you're there, but you have to rely and depend on so many other people to accomplish your job.
Wow.
And you can't treat them as, you know, subservient or anything. Right. They're partners.
You know what? That is, to me, that is the true mindset of a good leader. You don't hear leaders oftentimes acknowledging that the people under them are the thing that keeps the thing going.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, you don't hear that a lot. Yeah. So I'm glad to hear that was your mantra all these years.
I tell them all, I mean, there's no leader, regardless of what position level, that's doing it all on their own. If they are, then we probably need to have some other conversations, because that's not the case.
Yeah.
That is not the case. You need a team, you need a village. And I was fortunate that I had some very good people around me to support me.
Yeah. I think you but I think you're kind of minimizing. We're going to get it all out here for the world to know. You started out in the Corrections Academy, didn't finish it, but went on into the Police Academy, became a police officer, made it to sergeant, made it to lieutenant, could have retired, could have dropped and retired. Yeah. You know, drop means you're going to get a little bit more money when you leave. Could have dropped and retired, but you stayed around. You ended up getting appointed as an assistant chief.
Yes.
And it didn't stop there.
No. That was a surprise. And I'm sitting at my desk one morning. I get a call from a director, says, are you here? Are you working? I said, yes. He said, what are you doing? Well, I'm doing your report. Your report that you need.
Really working.
He said, well, the sheriff wants to see you. I said, okay. Can you tell me what? You know,
and that's scary when you're appointed, right?
Yeah,
Sheriff needs to see you.
I hadn't gotten appointed then, and I was his lieutenant. And I said, okay. I said, well, he said, well, stay around the station. I said, okay, I'm here. I'm scratching my head like, what's going on? A few minutes later, I get a call from the sheriff's secretary. And says, hey, Lieutenant Davis, sheriff would like to see you.
Who was the sheriff at the time?
Rutherford.
Rutherford, okay. Congressman now, okay.
Yes.
John
I got
Rutherford.
appointed to assistant chief. And I said, yes, ma'am. He said, he wants to see you. I said, okay. So now I'm really scratching my head, and I'm doing the slow walk, from my office upstairs, and I'm trying to think, what's going on? What's going on? I said, we just wrapped up a successful, special event. So what am I, what's going on? So I get upstairs, and then I see some movement. I said, oh, okay. And so I go in, I see the undersheriff. He says, hey, Tony, we idle chit-chat. Sheriff wants to see you. I said, okay. A few minutes later, we walk in, and we sit down. We start talking, and he tells me, he says, hey, I want to appoint you to assistant chief effective immediately. And I'm looking at him like, okay, somebody's pranking me. And
not a sigh of relief, but still, let me make sure.
And he said, but that's if you want it. I said, well, yes, sir. And he says, well, you'll be going to Zone 5, which used to be Zone 1, back home.
Back to the north side.
Home. And I said, okay. Any questions? I can't think of any. I mean, I'm speechless.
Yeah.
So I'm walking out, and I'm still trying to figure out what happened.
What happened?
And still don't know what happened. And I'm moving around. I'm walking around. I'm finishing reports. I go out to the zone. I go get some lunch, and then my chief called. He said, hey, I need you to get on my calendar. I need to meet with you this afternoon.
Oh, already?
And so we talked. Says, hey, congratulations. When did the sheriff say it's going to take effect? I said, well, he said effective immediately. And he said, well, that's what that means, immediately. So he's looking at my shoulders. He said, so why aren't you wearing your insignia? I said, Chief, I'll get right on that. And I had to get.
You just didn't know what to do, did you?
I really did. I mean, I was on a. Yeah. It was so surreal. I was on like a fog that whole day. But, again, fortunately, I got surrounded by some very good people, in the zone. And we, in that particular zone, there's a lot of challenges, a lot of violence. But I had good people around me and good people working with me.
You remember what the year? That had to be, Rutherford left in 2012, right?
He left.
Or did he come in office in 2012?
That was in 2013.
So 2013. And I'm asking that because the crime was through the roof.
It was. So we were averaging like 1 or 2 murders a day.
Yeah, it was through the roof.
And it was just every time you turn around, murders were occurring. In this area, and retaliations, and everything. Not to mention the shootings and any of the robberies.
Now, what was your responsibility for those crimes?
I had to come up with a strategy to try to curb some of the violence. And that's when we came up with Operation Ceasefire.
Operation Ceasefire, okay.
And it wasn't unique to us at the time, but other major cities had, implemented the same measures. And we were able to reduce the violent crimes, don't hold me to it, but I want to say about 30+%, but we were able to bring in some additional resources, which is what was needed for this area.
This troubled area to gunfire and murders dominating the culture and the headlines in Northwest Jacksonville. Sheriff John Rutherford says it needs to stop. Tonight, he says it's going to take more than just the residents of this troubled area to help make our streets safer.
We know the key to solving and preventing this activity is connecting with the community.
Well, today, the sheriff laid out a new initiative called Operation Ceasefire. It's a crime reduction program that targets neighborhoods hit hard by gun-related incidents.
Rob and Joy, you heard the sheriff say it just there. This program is all about connecting with the community and taking neighborhoods back by making people feel like they have protectors and defenders in the police. And the problem is big in size and scope. This map right here shows a 43% increase in aggravated assaults with a weapon being fired in the last year. A large majority of those crimes are in Northwest Jacksonville. And this crime map shows of the 37 homicides reported in the city, 20 are still active cases.
Bless our sheriff and everyone that's connected to him to make this a better known community, Gulf City.
A sheriff-led prayer, handshakes, and door-to-door engagement. 3 things that police believe will help them tackle the biggest challenge facing Northwest Jacksonville.
We decided to formulate Operation Ceasefire to specifically reach out into this community and ask the citizens to help us solve these open shootings and murders.
Yeah.
And I would often tell the other zone commanders, you're dealing with a lot of things. Yes, some areas are busier than others, but you're not dealing with the level of violence that we're dealing with here.
Right.
And so we needed additional resources, which that meant we brought in resources from other zones.
And Sheriff Rutherford also told us that he hopes to add more officers to Operation Ceasefire in the near future. He says right now officers are being pulled from other zones to help out in Northwest Jacksonville, but says that does not mean that other zones aren't being patrolled or are considered unsafe. He plans to push for more money for sworn officers and community service officers in the next budget meeting.
I had, like I say, my team at the time, they were just tremendous. And we put together a strategy working with other divisions, crime analysis, and we were able to really, bring a significant reduction. Work with the community, which is what so often is overlooked. The community has to have a stake in it be a partner in it.
That's right.
And so here we are, we were able to make a significant reduction.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times we don't realize that we talk about community policing, but we look at it in terms of the community affairs part of it,
Yes.
Dealing with the youth and housing and things like that. But when we get to the point where, like you did, where we understand that community policing even relates to homicides and carjackings and robberies and all those kinds of things, community policing encompasses all of that.
All of it.
Yeah, right.
It's a partnership. It is a true partnership, working in collaboration and partnership with the community. And that's where, community and law enforcement, you got to sit down at the table and you got to be honest about what's occurring and how do we go about addressing this in the most professional, lawful, respectful way.
Yeah. So you were out here and you did do some marvelous things on the north side of Jacksonville when you were an assistant chief, and we're grateful for the work that you did at that time. But you didn't stop there either.
No,
you just kept moving.
So we had this thing called the sheriff's election. Sheriff Rutherford was at the end of his term, and Sheriff Williams, he was a candidate, and we had other candidates that were running, and so. During that time in the department, especially as an appointed staff member, it's a tricky time.
Yes, it is.
It's a very tricky time.
I don't call it so much tricky as you just got to make a decision and stand on it.
You do, and you got to be willing to, hey, wherever it falls, you got to be willing to ride with that. And I was willing to do that. And Sheriff Williams, who was a director at the time, he asked me to go to lunch one day, and so we went to lunch. Policeman's favorite place, specialist white guys, barbecue. And so we went to eat barbecue, and he told me what he was doing. And
because Williams was a SWAT guy as well.
Too, yeah.
Okay.
And so he said, hey, I'd like your support. And I said, okay. And we talked, and I said, hey, I will support you because I believe in what you would be able to do, and I believe in you. I said, the only thing that I ask is stay away from negative, mudslinging. I said, I don't have an appetite for that.
Right.
Let's talk about it. Let's deal with the issues and stuff. And for the most part, hey, he stayed away from it. Yeah, he stayed away from it. There were some people that came after him, and he still held the high ground. And as it turned out, hey, and I took a lot of criticism from people for supporting them. And I said, but I'd work with them. Closely. When he started the gun crimes unit, he tapped me to be the sergeant of the gun crimes unit. And
okay, so you guys went way back.
Yes, we went back to when we were both SWAT guys, operators. He got promoted and he ascended through the ranks. And he decided, hey, I want to start this gun crimes unit. And I was in robbery at the time, and he stopped me in the hallway. He said, hey, and they called me Big Unit. He said, Big Unit. And the SWAT officer whose funeral we attended, he gave me that nickname, and some others.
I can see that.
But he said, hey, I want you to, come and supervise this new unit we're starting. And we talked about it. I said, hey, you're asking, I'm coming, and I did. And so, I got promoted to lieutenant from there.
So let me understand, because I was one of the ones that I've always sat on the side and assessed who's in whose camp, but you don't ever know why. You really don't know the why. So you and him had that history, and you had seen him work to try and reduce crime and get guns off the streets and things like that. So you had a reason to believe that he would be good for the job.
And one thing, Sheriff Williams, he didn't talk about himself or things that he did or he wanted to do. We would often try to get him to, hey, talk more about these things. But he was passionate about reducing violent crime and getting illegal crime guns off the streets. And oftentimes people talk about, Second Amendment infringements and all those types of things. And he was very strict. He was pro Second Amendment, but for lawfully, purchases, lawful purchases, and people that were lawfully permitted to have, possess arms and stuff. But the illegal crime guns, no, he wanted off the streets.
Right.
And so we partnered with ATF.
Quite honestly, we all should.
Well, we should, and we need it.
If you've ever lived in a community that's been plagued by gun violence,
and the African American community is affected. More than most communities and stuff. So so we did, and that's why, I decided to support it. I had no idea how it would turn out. And I knew I was an appointed staff member, and I knew, hey, if it goes the other way, I could be a lieutenant the next day.
Or you could be a retiree.
Or I could be a retiree. And but I was okay with that. I was at peace with that because I supported, the person that I believed in. And as they say, I voted my conscience.
Yeah. So you did vote for him?
Yeah, I did. I voted for both times. I did. Yes, I did. And
so then you get on his ticket, you get on his team as an assistant chief.
Yes.
and he wins.
Yeah, and there were no promises made, and this is one thing I can tell people, unequivocally. There was no pre-promises made as to what capacity I would serve, in an administration, if I would. I was hoping that, hey, at least I would be able to retain
where you were,
where
right.
I were. Or, maybe one more and stuff. I didn't see what he had in store. And that was a surprise. And I remember talking to, the who became the undersheriff at the time, Pat Ivey. We would talk because he was my chief. And he would say, hey, has Mike spoken to you yet? I said, no, he hasn't spoken to me yet. I said, man, okay, let me see if I can get him because he needs to talk to you. And he just kept saying, you'd be okay, you'd be okay. And I was taking my daughter was home from college, and I was taking her to lunch one day, and we had this conversation. And so I go to the meeting, I think a couple of days later, and, he's going through the transition. His name is executive staff, so I go and meet him and walk in, and big unit. He calls me big unit too.
Big unit.
And he says, hey, I want you to be my director of police services.
Wow.
And I look at him, I said, are you for real? Just like that.
How come you can never believe when these things happen to you?
It was just like, I just didn't see it.
It seems like your whole career, you were smart, you were articulate, you were loyal, you were a good policeman, you were all these things. And it happens to so many people that we don't see in ourselves what other people see in us.
Yeah. I just didn't see it. I didn't see it. And I sat there, I said, are you for real? He said, yeah. He said, I know you can do it. I was like, okay. And I said, yes, sir. Hey, I'll be happy to, serve on your executive staff. And then he talked about what he wanted done. He said, your first priority, I need you to take care of our fleet. It's at a severe deficit. I need you to get our fleet back up. And so we worked on that. So I did. I traveled around the country. I talked to people from across the country. I went and visited, this department and talked to so many people to see what they were doing and how to go about their process. I talked to some of the previous directors that were in that role. And, I was able to make, some contacts in some other areas about it. And, working with the city, we were able to get things, returning to the direction we needed to be, because they had been severely underfunded, and we had people didn't have cars, but I also had to manage the budget. And then I was always mindful that this is the taxpayers' money. It's not my personal checkbook. And so we were able to get our fleet restored, and then we were even able to upgrade it and transition to the SUVs. And that was a huge undertaking. Yeah. And my position to the sheriff, I said, we don't buy the same size shoe for everybody. I know, police cars are a bit different. I said, but we've got several officers that are 6'5", 6'6", 6'7". Yep. I said, and we're squeezing them into a small vehicle, which I believe is a safety issue. I said, I'd like, your permission to, pursue, purchasing SUVs. And I know that was a challenge with the city. And he gave his blessing. He said, okay.
Wow, so that was you.
Yes.
That was you. Okay. So I didn't know where it came from. I just knew all of a sudden we started seeing SUVs and people were relieved because, like you said, some of those taller officers or even wider officers were very uncomfortable for 12 hours a day.
The cars, they were compact, they were front wheel drive, so they weren't necessarily the safest, but, they were the most inexpensive. And so I had to go and speak with the public safety, chair of the public safety committee and the finance committee, and because I was trying to purchase 23 that 1 year. And actually, I did a show and tell with the finance chair at the time, and as fate would have it, two of the officers that showed up to be part of this show and tell, they were both 6'5", 6'6", and one had a recruit that was 6'7". Oh,
so you didn't plan that?
No, I didn't plan that. I just wanted her to see, hey, this is what these officers have to, sit in and stuff. And I'm gonna just say it was God, because hey, I had 3 6'5" plus officers show up, and because we needed special permission from the council to buy SUVs. And so when these officers got in these Impalas, she looked, she said, Director Davis, you got my full support, whatever you need. And we were able to buy 23 SUVs that year to start putting our taller officers
Wow. So, see, people think that these things just happen, that the sheriff's office just starts ordering SUVs all of a sudden because they want to order SUVs.
No.
So it's good to know that there's a reason behind everything that they do.
That's how they got started.
Wow.
And then talking to the reps from Ford, they decided because the sales for the SUVs actually were higher than the sedans that they thought, were going to be the top seller.
Right.
They stopped manufacturing the sedans, and so all we had was the SUVs.
Wow.
So that even helped. So that came about a year or so later. So it made that transition easier. But to get it started, we had to go through city council to get that approval.
So as the director of services, you were responsible for all of the kind of supporting stuff. You didn't have to worry about coming up with ways to really suppress crime and things like that, but you needed to take care of the other things that supported the officers who were out there doing their job. And I'm going to say this. My grandmother used to call it the street committee. So you know where I'm going with this. So people always have something to say. And there were those naysayers who were saying, oh, they just gave it to him because he was black. Yeah. Oh, they put him over there in services. You don't do anything in services. That's not even an important position. Yeah. And I know that you had to hear it because everyone heard it. And it was so unfair. And I'm glad that you're having this opportunity to explain that it was more than just a place, a job where you go and sit every day and read magazines and drink your coffee and, put your feet up on the desk, that you're actually working over there.
No, well, there was a lot to do. And, I tell people pretty much everything that anybody in the department has, equipment or whatever the case may be, services has a hand in it. The shoes you're wearing, services has a hand in that. The uniforms, all of that, the duty gear, we have the vest, we have a hand in that. Radios, all of that, we have a hand in. The pens, everything, we have a hand in it. And I tell people, no, it's not the most glamorous, but it's the business side of the organization.
That's right.
And with that, I would often tell them, hey, you can't do what you need to do if we don't do what we need to do.
You sure can. It's very necessary.
Right. So we needed to make sure that we had, vehicles that, would be able to, stand up to the rigors of police work. We did that. When I came in, we had tasers that were obsolete. The life cycle of a taser is about 5 years. We had tasers that were in service, 10, 12 years.
I probably had one.
I had one. And, there was a lot of discussion about, okay, well, what do we do? Do we look at recycled or repurposed? I was like, no, we're not doing that. And it was huge. It was a huge expense. I said, but my concern was if we issue an officer a taser and it doesn't deploy when it's supposed to, that's going to be difficult to explain to a spouse that, your loved one is seriously injured or killed because of bad or faulty equipment. And so we started the process of purchasing, tasers, and then that was going to take a really long time. And so my chief at the time, services, he said, well, Director, why don't we look at a lease program and leasing the tasers? And so we did, which we were able to get more tasers. We could lease them, and then we could recycle them.
Never even knew that was
we were able to lease the tasers, and then after, a 5-year cycle, we could upgrade. And so with the lease plan, it gave us the option to upgrade, after a period of time. Whereas if we purchased them, you own them.
Yeah, that's news. That's news to me too. I didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah, and so
that's a brilliant idea, though.
Because a taser at the time went for about $1,100-$1,200. So you think about outfitting.
Every 5 years.
All these officers and stuff. That's a huge expenditure. So we were able to get the tasers upgraded, to get the old tasers out of service.
Let me make sure that I have this part correct. Not only did you in services, not only do you take care of the police side of the house, you also take care of the correction side of the house. So you do everything.
Yes. Yeah. I tell people, look, we touched everything. Everything. Services, hands or footprint or something somewhere is in that. You don't get it without us for the most part.
Right. Did you bring any pictures that you wanted to share or no?
I did, and there's some that I'm still looking for, but the one that's
the one that I have.
Right. The one
I have that one.
The one you have, this is one that I was really proud of. And
yeah, I have this one. This is the 1957. And as a matter of fact, Mr. Charles Scrivens, who just recently passed away, gave me a copy of this picture, and he hand wrote across the top of it, Police Athletic League, 1957.
Well, and I had a chance to spend some time with Chief Scrivens.
Yeah,
we visited
good guy.
quite often, and you know, he told me a lot about my dad.
Oh my goodness, and, this one I have not seen.
Yeah, so
this is the light blue uniform shirt that Mr. Fluker was telling us about. Mm-hmm. Wow, yeah, I can see it now.
And so, when I do that, I look at that, and this is when I was a photo of me.
Oh my goodness, I see it.
And so there, like I say, there's some other articles I'm trying to find. I boxed up some things.
This is awesome.
And misplaced them, but
you still look like you were surprised.
Yeah. But
that's awesome.
But yeah, you know, we talked, and he gave me a lot of advice along the way, a lot of wisdom, and I still think about it to this day. Scrivens and I had a conversation about that, and he said, "Yeah, I remember your dad. He was in the third group, and he told me the year, and like I said, I have that information, but." You know what?
If this picture was from 57, then he had to be there before 57 or in 57. So that's awesome. But I was going to ask you, when did he retire?
When did my dad retire? I should know this.
That's all right. If you can't remember.
I don't remember the exact year, but he retired at 32 years.
At 32 years, okay. So it would have probably been somewhere in the 80s.
Yes, it was, yeah.
Okay, in the 80s. That's awesome. And when did he pass?
It's ironic, you know, when, like I said, we talked a lot, and I got a call from a friend of mine saying, "Hey, I'm so sorry," you know. Sorry about what? Because at that time I probably hadn't talked to my dad in a couple of weeks. Of just you know, just getting
just busy.
And I was told, "Hey, I'm so sorry." I said, "Well, what are you sorry?" I said, "Well, about your father." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And you didn't know that your father had passed. Because like I said, we didn't live.
Right.
You know, I go up to the house at pretty much any time, and like interesting. I said, okay. And so I went over to the house, and it was just very surreal. You know, it was a very surreal moment. And
wow.
You know, and then other family members, would come in, because a lot of family had met me, and so they walk in, they look at me, and they turn and look.
You look like somebody. So I just wanted to just acknowledge Mr. Mays, Mr. Tommy Mays, for all of his contributions to the Sheriff's Office and for helping to pave the way for people like me and you.
Yes.
So I just wanted to do that. Did you have any final thoughts that you wanted to? I know you wanted to talk about the BWC program a little bit.
Yeah, and thank you.
You're welcome.
For that. One of the proudest moments during my career, and one of the most fulfilling, was the implementation of the body-worn camera program. And that came with a lot of opposition internally.
I'm sure.
A lot of opposition.
I'm sure, because we do not want people seeing our every move.
Right, from rank and file. But the focus was, we've got to build trust and reestablish that trust in the community. And as law enforcement officers, everything we do is transparent. It should be transparent.
Should be.
And so we were able to get that program up and off the ground. Again, like I said, there was a lot of opposition internally. There were people, rank and file, that, really opposed to it.
Yeah, I didn't realize that came under you. Yeah. I didn't realize that came under you. That came, I think, right after I left. But I do remember talking about they weren't going to be able to use, people talking about they weren't going to be able to use the bathrooms. They wouldn't be able to sit in their cars and talk to their wives on the phone. And I mean, it was really just kind of blown out of proportion.
No, we were able to. Sheriff Williams, we talked about it, and he says, "Yeah, I want a program." And there was some on his staff that didn't want the program, but he gave me the assignment to run point on that, and I'm grateful that he entrusted me with that responsibility. And so we were able to get it off the ground. We went through a series of town hall meetings.
I bet. I remember that.
That weren't all that pleasant, but they were necessary.
Right.
But the team, we did a lot of research. And again, when I talk about making things happen, it's not just me. I had two great lieutenants, with me every step of the way. Yeah. Researching to do the policy that we have, and then on the technical side of it.
And that was a lot of work.
It was. I mean,
because you were not only dealing with having to get the police officers to buy into it, but the entire community.
And then there was a lot of skepticism.
Yeah.
And so we had to reassure them that, number one, you know, the data wasn't going to be misused or you know, handled in a way that would, you know, violate any trust. And we had to, you know, assure the officers that, hey, nobody's, you know, going after you to do anything, you know, or headhunting. But, you know, as Sheriff Williams often say, hey, if you're doing things right, then there's nothing to hide or worry about. And so
firmly believe it.
That was our mantra. And we carried on with that, and we were able to get it off the ground. And with the successful grant, we were able to get that. And, you know, this is what we have today. So it's just continuing to grow. And now you see it's all across the country.
Oh, yeah.
CBS 47, Fox 30, Action News, Jax.
Now back to that breaking news. Within the last hour, Action News Jax got the first ever video released of an officer-involved shooting from JSO. It comes following weeks of local protests calling for more transparency from JSO. Action News Jax Christy Turner joins us live from JSO headquarters. Christy, this comes after Sheriff Mike Williams said the video would be released this week.
And I watched that video. It is very tense, and it happens really fast. This is the first time the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office is releasing officer body camera video capturing a police-involved shooting. This comes after calls from the community for the quicker release of this body cam footage.
Yeah.
Well, kudos to you for doing that, because that was some technology that was necessary. It was brand new. A lot of people really did not want it. So just getting it past that point, not even talking about finding something that was a really quality product that would last and that would get the job done and wouldn't break the bank.
Yes.
So kudos to you and those who worked with you for making that happen. I had another thought and I just lost it. Did you have any final words?
No, I just want to thank you for this opportunity. I think it's a terrific thing that you're doing, and for the Brotherhood, making sure that, hey, our history is recorded and not forgotten. I think that's just such a marvelous thing. So, and thank you for doing that.
Oh, no, it's our pleasure. But no, I'm just glad that you agreed to come and sit down and talk to us, because so many times we don't know your story. You know, we just know what we hear. We've seen you around. We know that you came up through the ranks, but we really don't know your story. And it is refreshing to hear a story of a little boy who grew up in 32209.
Yes.
32209. Hey, if you're not from Jacksonville, Florida, just Google 32209 and you'll find out.
Yes.
But it's good to see someone from 32209, an African-American male who has really gone out and made his way in life and has done well and has given back so much to our city. We could never repay you for all that you've given back. And I mean, I know people say, well, that was his job. You get a little compensation for it, but we could never really repay you. That was what I was going to ask you. And I'm not going to ask you to say the name, but can you tell us, so you retired in
2019.
2019. So you've been retired for about 5 years now. And I know you probably can't say the name, but what are you doing now in you're still not sitting on the couch eating bonbons, are you?
No, I'm not. No. I took about 90 days off, but during that time, I was already interviewing for the position that I have right now.
Okay.
I'm the director of security and parking at a local hospital.
Okay. All right. So he's still giving back to the community, still doing great things. And we're just so proud of you for everything that you've done. We look forward to your continued work in this community and throughout the city of Jacksonville. And hopefully we'll get a chance to speak to you again about some of the other things that you're going to be doing.
I love it.
All right. All right. Well, you take care.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate you.
Never lose faith. That's the key. You have to believe in something that you can't see. You have to believe when you don't see no way how. You have to buckle down and keep believing. God is always coming. Here's the deal. The moment you ask God for something, He boxes it up and He ships it to you. Here's the problem with the package. He never gives you the date that it's going to arrive. It's going to come. He just don't tell you